Section 63 of A Guidebook of Art, Architecture, and Historic Interests in Pennsylvania, edited by Margaretta Archambault. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Tatiana Chichilla, Carbon County. Formed March 13, 1843, named for its coal deposits. Coal was first discovered by Philip Ginter in 1791 on top of Sharp Mountain, now town of Summit Hill, 9 miles southwest of Mauch Chunk. In 1818, the Lehigh Navigation Company and the Lehigh Coal Company were formed. Under skillful management, the almost insuperable obstacles in the way of transportation were overcome. Boats 18 feet wide by 25 feet long, 2 or more hinged together, were floated by artificial freshets on the Lehigh. Owing to the great fall in the river and consequent rapidity of its motion, dams were constructed near Mauch Chunk, with sluice gates, invented by Josiah White, a manager of the Navigation Company. They were the first on record used permanently. Lehigh coal is the hardest known anthracite in the world. Other mineral productions are iron, slate, and mineral paint. Wire rope was first invented in Mauch Chunk. The first settlers were Moravian missionaries, who in 1746 purchased 200 acres on the north side of Mahoning Creek above its mouth for converted Mohican Indians. Each Indian family possessed their own lot of ground, and Gnadenhutten became a town. The church stood in the valley, with the Indian houses forming a crescent on one side. On the other side was the missionaries' house and burial ground. The road to Wyoming lay through the settlement, being the famous Warrior's Path over Nescopec Mountain. In August, all partook of their own first fruits in a love feast. Christian Ranch and Martin Mack were the first missionaries residing here. Several parts of Scripture had been translated into the Mohican language. The Holy Communion was administered every month, the Indians calling that the Great Day. In 1749, Bishop Baron John de Waterville went to Gnadenhutten and laid the foundation of a large church, Indian congregation 500 persons. After Braddock's defeat in 1755, the whole frontier was open to the savage foe. Suddenly in 1757, the mission house on the Mahoning was attacked and burnt by French and Indians, and many inhabitants were murdered. A broad marble slab, placed there in 1788, near Lehighton, marks the grave of those massacred. In 1756, Benjamin Franklin was authorized by the provincial government to erect forts on the Lehigh. One opposite Gnadenhutten was named Fort Allen for William Allen, the Chief Justice. At Weisport, in the rear of the Fort Allen house, may be seen the well dug under Franklin's supervision. It was within the enclosure of the fort and supplied the soldiers with water. Weisport was settled by Colonel Jacob Weiss, quartermaster general in the Revolutionary Army, on site of Fort Allen. Municipal parks are at Lehighton and Weisport, given by Jacob Weiss. Also at Lehighton is All Saints Chapel, Early English Gothic. In 1780, Andrew Montour, leader of an Indian party, captured the Gilbert family, 12 persons, and took them over Mauch Chunk and Broad Mountains into the Nescopec Path, across Quebec Creek to Mahoning Mountain, over wild and rugged country to Canada. Eventually they were all redeemed at Montreal in 1782 and returned to Byberry. A view of great scenic beauty is from Prospect Rock over the Nescopec Valley. Cloud Point, frequently covered by vapor, may be seen. Near is Glen Thomas with a picturesque amber cascade, named for David Thomas, pioneer of the iron trade. Glen Anoco, 2 miles above Mauch Chunk, with its wild beauty, total ascent over 900 feet, forms the channel for the clear stream which flows over innumerable cascades to the Lehigh. The most noticeable are Chameleon Falls, 50 feet high, and Dinoco Falls, 90 feet high, with overhanging rocks covered with moss and ferns. Mauch Chunk, county seat, population 3,666, Indian name means Bear Mountain, first settled in 1815, has one principal street following the tortuous course of Mauch Chunk Creek as it winds through a narrow gorge between 3 high, steep, and rocky mountains, averaging 850 feet above the town. The important buildings are directly on this street. Courthouse, Norman, brownstone, quarried at Rockport, Carbon County, built in 1894. Jail, where some of the Molly Maguires were executed. The Dimmock Memorial Library, built in 1890, brick. Churches here and in East Mauch Chunk are unusually handsome. St. Mark's Protestant Episcopal, Gothic, stone, has memorial windows by J&R Lamb. The reredos is very beautiful. First Presbyterian, colonial, brick, has memorial window by John Lafarge and one by Tiffany. The Immaculate Conception, Roman Catholic, also has fine stained glass windows. St. Paul's Methodist Episcopal is the oldest church in town. The women's clubs are seeking to improve conditions, sanitary and scenic, to widen the life of the town and in every way make it more in unison with its natural surroundings. In the limited space of the narrow valley, land is too precious to be used except for buildings, but the hills are so magnificent that they look to them for the necessary beauty. Flagstaff Park has natural effect. The first railroad in Carbon County, and one of the oldest in the United States, is the famous Switchback, a gravity road extending from Mauch Chunk to Summit Hill, opened in 1832 for bringing coal from the mines to the canal. Used now only for pleasure. A double track is laid to the summit of Mount Pisgah, 2,322 feet distant from the foot, at an angle of 20 degrees, with elevation about 900 feet above the river. Seen from the top is superb, with a succession of mountain ridges rising, range after range, with a distant view of Lehigh Water Gap, and farther to Schooley's Mountain in New Jersey. The principal attraction at Summit Hill is the burning mine, discovered to be on fire in 1859. General Craig, of Revolutionary fame, resided here. End of section 63.